Hey there, my name is Kyle and I'm the Director of Software Development here at StratusGrid. Welcome to my first tutorial video in our new series on AWS CDK. In this video, you will learn how to create and deploy a Vue.js single-page application into AWS S3 with a CloudFront distribution to handle performant content delivery. We'll also learn how to set up a CI/CD pipeline to automatically deploy our Vue app when we push changes to our Git repository. Alright, let's take a closer look at our agenda for this course. First, we're going to initialize our CDK application with the AWS CDK CLI. Then we're going to create our Vue app using the Vue CLI tool. After we have our projects created and initialized, we will start building our application stack with CDK, which will include our S3 bucket to hold our compiled Vue app and the CloudFront distribution. Next, we'll set up our CI/CD pipeline stack, which will include an integration with GitHub to automatically run various build and deploy stages upon a Git push to a branch that we specify. Finally, we'll test everything out and get to see the automated builds and deployments in action. Alright, let's jump into the code. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our terminal and we are going to initialize a new CDK application. So I'm going to type CDK init language TypeScript. We're going to be using TypeScript for this CDK project. There's a couple other, a few other language options that you have: Go, Python, Java, .NET Core. I believe that's all of them. So we're actually going to run this command. It's going to initialize our new project. And while that's going, I'm actually going to open up a new terminal, and I'm going to make a new directory and go into that. And I'm going to create a new Vue app in this directory. I'm actually just going to pick the default Vue 2 project configuration. You can obviously change any of that or include different plugins if you would like. So I'm going to go back to my original terminal where we're working with CDK, and I'm going to actually start installing some packages that we'll need for our application stack. And I'm going to copy some of these in just for speed. So we're installing AWS S3, S3 deployment, CloudFront, and CloudFront origins. And that will give us what we need to set up our S3 bucket that will house our built Vue app as well as our CloudFront distribution pointed at that bucket, and then also the deployment of our local code package into S3. So I believe our Vue app should be done now. So if we do npm run serve, we should see, obviously now, we have our Vue app is running. So that's good. So I'm actually going to cancel that. Let's switch back here. Okay, so now we're ready to actually start building out our stack. So we're going to go into this pre-built stack here, Vue CDK demo stack. And here is where we're going to start writing our code. So the first thing we want to do is import what we need from the packages that we just installed. So star as S3 from S3 deploy from we need CloudFront. And we're going to call this one origins from AWS. All right. That should be what we need there. So the first thing we need is we need a S3 bucket that will actually hold and house our website, or host our website, I should say. So we'll call this our website bucket. This is going to be a new S3 bucket. Pass in our scope, and we'll give it an ID, and we're going to call this Vue CDK demo site bucket. And we will give this some properties. Say website index document is going to be index.html, public read access, true. So the next thing we want is we're going to want a CloudFront distribution in front of this S3 bucket for performant serving of that content, caching, all that. So we're going to create that web distribution equals new CloudFront distribution. This we're going to call this Vue CDK distribution. And we're going to give it a default behavior, an origin, new origins, S3 origin. All right, so now we have our bucket and our web distribution set up. Next thing we need is we need to basically tell CDK to deploy our built Vue application. Essentially, what gets put into the dist folder. We need to tell it to deploy that out to the bucket that we just created. So in order to do that, we're going to say website deploy equals new S3 deploy bucket deployment. We're going to say Vue CDK demo site deployment. So in here we need to tell it essentially where to look locally for the built artifact. And we're going to say sources. We can obviously give it an array. We're just going to have one S3 deploy source asset. And we're going to say this is in our Vue/dist folder because we created that Vue folder in our project. We need to tell the deployment what bucket to put it in, and we're going to actually just pass a reference to our bucket that we created. So website bucket. And then we can give it a distribution as well, which is very handy. So we're going to also pass a reference to our web distribution. And we can also, on every deploy, we can set up some invalidations, which is nice. So we'll set up that just to show how it works. Distribution paths. And then say we just want to invalidate everything. Every time we do a deploy, do a full CloudFront distribution invalidation. So there it is. That's our full website stack to deploy our Vue app into S3. So the next thing we want to do is we want to actually create a new stack to hold our pipeline definitions. And we're going to be using the CDK pipeline high-level constructs. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a new file in here called Vue CDK demo pipeline stack. And we're going to need some more imports. So I'm going to go back to my terminal and I'm going to again copy in some packages that we need to get this all working. We're going to be installing CDK pipelines, which is what I just mentioned. It contains the high-level construct for the CDK pipeline, but then we'll also need code pipeline actions, and IAM. All right. So I'm just going to copy in my imports here just for speed's sake. So this is what we'll need to set up all of our pipeline code. And then we'll also need to import our stack. So we need to say Vue CDK demo stack. And we'll import that from our Vue CDK demo stack file. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to actually create a stage first. So this is part of a code pipeline stage, and you could do this via a high level a class in CDK. So we're going to say export class Vue CDK demo deployment stage. And we're going to set up our constructor, which is similar to pretty much any other construct. I'm going to pass in a scope of a type of construct, an ID, and our props, which are optional. And then we gotta call our parent constructor. So in here, all we're gonna do is initialize a new, create an instance of our Vue CDK demo stack. And we're gonna call this Vue application. All right, now that we have our stage already created, we're going to get into actually creating our pipeline. So create another class. We're say Vue CDK demo pipeline stack. This is going to extend stack. And we're just going to copy this. And this is going to be stack props. So in our pipeline stack, the first constructs that we're going to define are our source artifact and our destination artifact. So that's going to be looking like this: source artifact equals new code pipeline artifact. All right, that's done. Next thing we got to do is actually create our pipeline. So we're going to say pipeline equals new pipelines CDK pipeline. So this is essentially a wrapper around the code pipeline construct, and it builds a lot of functionality in for you for deploying specifically CDK applications. It's really nice, really useful, and you know, you get a lot of functionality out of the box and a lot less configuration that you have to do. So we say Vue CDK demo pipeline, and then we're going to start defining our properties. So the first thing we're going to say is our cloud assembly artifact is going to be our destination artifact. And that's actually the only required property of this. But we're obviously going to do a lot more. We need to actually set up what our source action is, which, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we're going to be tying this to a GitHub repository via a webhook integration. So every time you know, we push code to a specific branch, it's going to kick off this code pipeline in AWS. So to do that, we're going to say source action equals new code pipeline actions dot GitHub source action. We're going to say, give this a name. We're just going to say GitHub is our action name. The branch we're going to look at is main. Output is going to be our source artifact. So pulling from GitHub, downloading the code, and putting it into our source artifact so that our pipeline can pick it up and build it, and then obviously deploy it. So the next property here for our GitHub source action is another step that you'll have to do on your own. It's not part of this course, but there's plenty of examples out there of how to do this. You have to go into your GitHub account and actually generate a personal access token and give it, I believe it's just the repo permissions and the webhook permissions, and that will allow your pipeline to listen on those webhooks. And what I did is I took that personal access token and put it into a AWS Secrets Manager secret, and then there's actually a nice little helper function to pull that in dynamically when your pipeline is running. So that looks like this: OAuth token, CDK. This is just part of the CDK core package. CDK secret value secrets manager, and then this is called, I called my secret Stratus Kiel, which is my GitHub username, dash GitHub, oops, GitHub dash pat for personal access token. The owner of the repository is my GitHub user, Stratus Kiel, and the repo is Vue.js demo. The next thing we're going to define is our synth action. So this basically tells the pipeline that it's going to synthesize the code into the CloudFormation templates. It's pulling the code, the CDK code from the source artifact, synthesizing it, and then dropping the built synthesized CloudFormation templates into our cloud assembly artifact, which is like our destination artifact, and we define that above. So that looks like this. Pipelines, simple synth action, standard npm synth, we're using npm, source artifact, and then our cloud assembly artifact is our destination artifact. And then the key piece of this, so at some point within this we need to actually build our Vue app. And part of this simple synth action, we get a build command property. And then we can actually build our Vue app just before the point of synthesis, so that it can be picked up later, the built distribution of it. So cd, we're going to say cd Vue, and then we're going to run an npm CI, and then an npm run build. And so that's going to change into our Vue directory where our Vue app lives. It's going to install all the packages based on our package lock, and then it's going to build the Vue app, which will then prepare it for deployment. All right, so now that our pipeline is defined, we are going to add our application stage that we defined above to this, which will then deploy our stack. So add application stage. It's a helper method on the pipeline. We're going to say new Vue CDK demo deployment stage. And we have to pass some properties into this, a scope, and then an ID. So we're going to say Vue application deployment. And there's that. And then there's one more thing. So we need to give our pipeline some permissions in order to actually create resources in AWS. there's a couple different ways you can do this. Generally, best practice with AWS permissions is to grant the most minimum amount of permissions that your application needs. This can get very tedious with CDK because it has to create a lot of different roles and various permissions for all the different resources that you're connecting together. And it does a lot of that without you really knowing. So I have a kind of generic set of policy statements that allow the pipeline to do what it needs to do only through CloudFormation. So, if there's any sort of malicious code that makes it into the application via some upstream dependency, it wouldn't just be able to straight out run commands or make calls to the AWS APIs directly. It would actually, the only way it could really be attacked, I guess, is if somehow the CloudFormation templates were updated, beyond the point of synthesis. So this may or may not be what you need for your application, and I would definitely consider this when you're building a production-ready application with CDK. Determine what your requirements are in terms of permissions and security. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to use this policy that I have. It's actually kind of a set of statements. I'm going to copy it in instead of typing all of this out. Basically, this gives the pipeline permissions to perform any action on any CloudFormation stack. Then here, this gives the pipeline permission to do any action on any resource only through CloudFormation. So again, this doesn't give the pipeline access to do anything only through CloudFormation. So whatever the templates that it has, it can do. And then also we give it some permissions on the CDK bootstrapped bucket that it uses to upload artifacts and stuff like that. So again, don't just use this in production. Definitely check out what your actual requirements are in terms of security. All right, so this is what we need to do all of our automated deployments. Sorry, not manual deployments, automated deployments of our Vue app. So we're going to go back to our terminal, and we are going to run a CDK deploy and see what happens. All right, so I skipped ahead there because that deployment actually took a while. So our pipeline stack is now deployed out to AWS, and if I go to AWS and look at that new Vue CDK demo pipeline stack, we can see that it's currently building. It pulled the source from GitHub, and it's now running npm CI. Now it's going to run our Vue app build. And then it's going to synthesize the CDK app to output the CloudFormation templates, which it will store as an artifact for the deployment step. And so you can see now it actually did synthesize. So we have all of our CloudFormation templates. So that looks good. And if we go back, Now it's going to go into the self-mutate stage so if you make changes to the pipeline, you can just push that change via Git, and it's going to actually update the pipeline as part of this process, which is pretty cool. So you only have to manually deploy your pipeline stack from your local machine once, and then from there on, you can follow your standard, Git flow methodology or whatever to start doing continuous integration and continuous deployment. So this may take a while. I may skip ahead through these, and we can see, each step it'll go through, and it'll build assets, and then it'll prepare and deploy the CDK application. All right, so our assets have succeeded, and now our Vue application is being prepared for deployment. All right, so our application has deployed. So if we go over to our CloudFront distribution that has been created via our pipeline, we take our domain name and load it up in our browser. We have our live Vue app now. Yep, there we go. So that's essentially all I wanted to talk about in this video today. Obviously, this could be extended and made a lot more production ready. You could have multiple pipelines for a dev branch, and you could have multiple stages to different environments. So you could have when you push to your main branch, it could kick off a deployment immediately to a staging environment where you could run all sorts of synthetic tests and end-to-end tests and load testing. And then, from there you could have like a manual deployment stage to production. There's a lot of possibilities there, and maybe in the future I will do more tutorials on that. So yeah, feel free to leave some suggestions in the comments if you would like to see certain things about CDK, really related to anything. I'd love to hear what your feedback is, and I really hope you enjoyed this video today, and I hope you learned a lot. I know I learned a lot when learning how to do all this stuff. So thanks again for your time.